Hi, welcome. I'm Roberto, and this is Riffing Off My Life. Whoops, my green screen. There. Oops, sorry, this is the psychedelic background. I'll need that later. There. Today I'm going to read you 3 short stories that I wrote over the past few years. None of these stories are AI generated in any way, nor did I use AI to polish them up. Instead, I took the trouble to develop my stories from ideas, to rough drafts, to revision after revision, to the form that they are in today. I may read some of my stories at earlier stages of development. In general, these stories are mostly unpublished, though I have submitted some and a couple actually did get published. This first story, which I wrote for a creative writing class in October 2012, is called Mr. Coffee Shows His Age. I hope you enjoy. His burner was stained black-brown. His green lamp that indicated a fresh pot was dead. These were sure signs he'd worn out his welcome with the Smiths. He wondered if they were humoring him. Which night would the father sneak into the kitchen to remove him? He dreaded the tote where anonymous garbage went. He didn't want to end up like a neighborhood stray. Everyone pretended to feel sorry but wouldn't think twice about kicking when no one looked. The gaudy European import with the phony-sounding name Keurig was displacing him. Ever since the oldest Smith boy bought that pretentious piece of junk for his mother last Christmas, the single-serving brewer had become the darling device, bringing deep flavor and convenience into their lives as if those were joy. Mr. Coffee could have pointed out the other brewer's wasteful electrical consumption, but didn't. Feeling blue and helpless, he started shutting out the world. Mrs. Smith noticed it now took longer to brew a pot than usual. She asked Mr. Smith what was wrong. "Oh, nothing a little rinse couldn't cure," he said, trying to win sympathy. Her mouth tightened, like he'd just insulted her choice of lipstick. She went a shade of red as she cleared her throat. "Well, you know how busy I've been since I started working again. Would it kill you to ask the kids or their dad?" Her rejoinder made him feel like an ingrate. He apologized profusely until she cut him off. Back when he had been the Christmas present from Mrs. Smith to Mr. Smith, he felt like a newborn child, all of the attention the parents lavished upon him. Mr. Smith used to buy fresh ground beans from the coffee roasting house on Atlantic Avenue. Mrs. Smith used to lovingly rinse out his reservoir with mild vinegar every week. Now the father bought the cheap store brand, 100% pure Arabica beans. Every coffee variety was an Arabica bean. And the mother no longer cared to clean off his residues, could barely be bothered to even wipe off his dingy plastic exterior. The age-old coffee splashes, obscuring his once gleaming trademark logo, made him feel the derelict that he appeared. Now that the kids were old enough to drink coffee, too, it would have been nice if they could have provided him a renewed sense of mission. One day, he told the sink disposal unit about his problems. The other appliance said, "Your problem is you've tolerated that joker at all. I'll take care of it, MC." That morning, he was in full use again. He smiled with content as he finished brewing the 3rd pot this morning. Mr. Smith headed out the kitchen door with a hefty bag outlining a familiar shape. "What happened to Keurig?" he asked number 1's son. The son had an annoyed face as he answered, "The cord got all chewed up. Don't know why Dad's blaming it on me." "Too bad," said Mr. Coffee. "I liked him." The end. The next story I'll read was accepted and published by Devil's Party Press, now Current Words Publishing, on September 27, 2018. I call it My Own Man. Remember, this is a work of fiction. At bedtime, Wynne found me asleep in the tub. After the fight we had at dinner over her not appreciating the laundry and dishes I did so she could take online courses, we just sort of avoided each other. She logged into her discussion forums and worked on her thesis, while I went to the den to watch Duck Dynasty. I really hate that show. But I wanted to mock her family back in Louisiana with a stereotypical image of backwoods simpletons. The truth is, they were no stupider than the media-savvy louts on the show who exploited the personas like farmers milking full cows. I'd always told myself that I disliked her parents for their political views, but there was something else I couldn't really pin down. They were always cordial, but I questioned whether they really liked me and my staunch Connecticut liberalism. I left the den and went to the kitchen, poured a glass of Chablis, and brought that, along with a Grisham novel, to the bathroom for a nice long soak. What I wanted was to escape sullen thoughts about breaking up our good thing. She really was thinking of our best interests in the long run. I had no right to insist on my preferences. I chalked it up to earlier in the day when I had been a little touchy because of the shit I had taken from my boss Larry about focusing my efforts more on the job at hand instead of looking at porn sites. I could believe what that girl was doing, trying to out me as a perv right there in front of other coworkers. I had texted my wife about it several times this afternoon and she hadn't returned any of them. When I asked her why, she said, sorry, she'd been working on Excel spreadsheets all day for her boss's conference. I said I wished that I had someone to do my Excel spreadsheets, but she only gave me this look, like I was a kid who had only heard half of the story and was trying to retell it his way. Later she asked if I really was looking at porn, and I said, God, no. When she finally finished her work for the night and decided to check on me, she saw that my head was leaning against the end of the clawfoot tub with my arms hanging limply over the edge. My right index finger pointed at the shards of glass lying in a pool of clear liquid on the hardwood. I looked unconscious, maybe even dead. She began slapping my face, but stopped trying to revive me when my eyelids fluttered and she felt my warm breath. Then she felt my pulse and let herself exhale. She asked if I'd taken my pills. My lips moved but made no sound. That was when she noticed a dark, slimy leaf shape protruding from my ear. All the while that she was attending to me, I saw her as if in a dream state. I heard her say, "What the fuck?" At the same time, I felt, thought, heard something in my core. Cells? DNA? Warning my body or its body to keep away from her hand, not to let her grab on. She grasped at the end that looked like it was the tip of a leaf. She later told me, but it undulated, and she let go. She got over her revulsion and tried again, but too late. It had retracted into my head, and when it did, I felt like I was being drawn down to the depths, past the bottom of the tub, which couldn't have been more than a foot full of sudsy water. God damn it, I thought. I wasn't going to lose all of our arguments that easily. She was the one who was wrong. I was not getting in her way. When I drew breath to speak, I drank in warm water instead, causing me to hack and splutter, making me sit up suddenly in spite of the strong pull to end it all now. The coughing cleared both my throat and my head. In my mind, I had risen through murk and broken the water's surface as if coming from a depth beyond what a bathtub could hold. My wife's face became crystal clear. I saw her lips move, but it wasn't her I was hearing. Some new voice was drilling down into my ears to connect with me, and it did. I felt a pin spot light up somewhere deep in my brain, and it seemed to coalesce, a myriad of other thoughts that were zipping and crisscrossing through my mind at light speed. In that nexus, I felt beatific. Over the next 2 weeks, I started to speak in tongues, even though I'd never gone to church a day in my life. Wynne said she'd seen the term for it when she was researching schizophrenia for a paper last spring. Glossolalia, like some obscure Southern belle's name. I went to see a psychiatrist and neuroscientist about it, and neither could offer a sound explanation. Since I didn't seem to be hurting anyone when I was under its trance, they recommended we leave it be to see if the syndrome would fade away. The frequency, which was 4 to 5 times a day, dwindled to just once, right at bedtime, which always spooked Wynne because I sat up straight and began reciting as soon as my eyes closed after my head had hit the pillow. She started sleeping in the living room not long after. Eventually, our marriage ended, but not because of the glossolalia. She just thought that I had changed into a complete stranger, like I'd been possessed. I tried to assure her that I was still the same me, still my own man, but neither of us really believed that. Still, I did not dislike my new self. I no longer tried to wheedle favors out of people. Instead, I insisted on my own terms for everything, saving me needless inner conflict. Once at work, I slapped a coworker hard in the face for speaking ill of my boss. HR was all set to crucify me, but when I told Larry that the coworker was spreading rumors about his sexual orientation, He pulled strings to get me off the hook, and they went after the other guy and got him fired. The old me would have been too timid to do something like that. I would have just taken more shit, just like the shit I took when I was married to Win. Speaking of Win, I saw her the other day at the cafe near the main library, sitting with some bearded man in tweed. He looked like a refined version of the Hicks from Duck Dynasty, pretending to be something he was not. My equal. My replacement. He must think he's some intellectual hotshot now that he's with Win. And she's a college graduate. But I'm with people too. Like, I had lunch with the owner of the gun and ammo shop. He's been trying to convince me that I need a good conceal and carry firearm. He says that a Glock 19 would suit me well. And as I am nothing if not my own man, I'm starting to agree. The end. Finally, I'll read for you an unpublished story that I've been working on since the early days of the pandemic. It's still a work in progress, but the working title is The Trail Through the Woods. I might just rename it Jacob's Woods, but you let me know in the comments which title you prefer. And now, The Trail Through the Woods. What I'm going to relate may or may not be about anyone living or dead, but it's as good a yarn as any ever woven about bygone years. Off a county road 10 miles east of my neighborhood, which is already on the outskirts of my remote Midwestern town, there's an old dirt road with a secret easily kept. Ours is a bedroom community of a large Illinois university. The only traffic coming and going are locals, commuting or doing errands. We never get visitors, not even to our pleasant little park with a fountain and a statue of our first mayor, the presumed builder of the park. We go to a neighboring community to borrow books. The nearest medical center is 8 miles northeast. When kids got bored in the summertime, they'd take to riding their bikes to the dirt road, or walking, if too poor to own one, or too secretive to let their folks know they were outside. But seldom did any travel the entire route. The funny thing is, the road was farther away from our town than the neighboring library, but rumor had it that where it ended, in a dark forest of unknown age, there was a lost treasure hidden by robbers. This held more fascination for a kid than the library, where you had to abide by rules and be quiet. Somehow, only we kids knew about this, not the grown-ups. None of us spoke about it around our parents. "And where are you off to?" asked the mother of her child. "Just going to Jimmy's," was the reply she got back, and to which she responded with a demand for proof of completed homework. The child let out an exaggerated sigh, and went to retrieve the proof. Satisfied, she added, "Don't be riding off alone, you hear me?" In answer, the sound of the door closing, her child's footsteps drumming on the porch, and down the steps, both annoyed her and gave her pause. The mother had considered but decided against the telling of a cautionary tale to bolster the severity of her warning against solo trips. Perhaps that was too long ago to matter, and anyway, was what she had heard in her childhood even real anymore? It was time to let the past go, she decided. Decades ago, 2 boys and a girl rode on their bicycles in search of a prize. With backpacks full of snacks and useful things, they were led by a strong curiosity to see if the legends were true. The girl, who was the younger sister of one of the boys, sat precariously on her brother's hand-me-down bike with the chopper-style handlebars and the slippery banana seat, which he'd outgrown, now preferring his more grown-up red 6-speed cruiser with a leather saddle seat. She found it hard to steer with her arms stretched out so far. He turned around to see if she was keeping up. "Keep it steady, Sadie, or you're going to crash and get hurt," said her brother Jason, who did not wish to explain any injuries to his parents, who'd warned them both against riding near the woods. "I am. You're driving too fast," said Sadie. "It's because you're too slow, Shady. I'm going to tell Ma you teased me. And I'll tell her you followed us when you were supposed to stay home." "Hey, you two, stop fighting and pay attention to the road," said Arnie, who wasn't related to the siblings but often felt like he was their middle brother. "We're getting closer." They said nothing in reply, and all 3 bent to the task of riding on. The way there was littered by fallen debris and leaf mold, and occasional abandoned junk in the ditch, where they saw a contraption that old folks called a velocipede. To the kids, it might as well have been an alien spaceship. They said nothing about it, but looked at the path ahead, with the dark outline of trees beginning to dominate the horizon. The road there seemed to stretch for miles, even though surely, as hard as they'd been pedaling, they should have reached the woods by now. To call it a road was to glorify it. It was nothing more than a dusty, often muddy trail with a high crown running most of its length, rutted on either side by ditches. Its surface alternated between gravel and bare dirt. The ditches were full of standing water and bugs which either flew in clouds or skated on the murky surface of pooled water. Back in the early 1800s, the farmer Jacob Oleander used to transport hay and harvest on it. More than one wag said they saw him riding at night, swearing to have seen moving shapes underneath the heavy tarps covering his freight. The low population density of his day owed to the lack of documentation and corroboration of these unseemly tales. It is true that he was the maker and maintainer of the thoroughfare, so it was understandable why he might spend later hours on it to clear obstructions wrought by storm and other activity. One dark night, the few people who didn't think too ill of him noted his failure to return from a sojourn to the woods. No one knows whatever became of the farmer. In later years, traveling the road was slightly easier thanks to the contributions of others who wished to use it, but it somehow never got prioritized by the county, so it remained an ill-used back road by which one might pass old-growth forests separating the early farmsteads. In particular, the one which caught everyone's fancy became known as Jacob's Grove, for it surrounded a good portion of his homestead and farm on the east, bordered by a river. Far away, the woods seemed small, but once entered, it could be as dark as an ancient forest, where daylight could only cast narrow beams. The three children, garrulous on the way there, became silent upon entering, as they were enveloped by what seemed an ancient gloom. When their eyes adjusted and they could make out shapes in passing, they saw a mossy stump that they first took as a large boulder, the remnant of a long-gone tree catching one of the stray beams. It might have been lightning or old age which had done the job of felling the oak tree. All of the surrounding trees seem to be crowding around them like grown-ups do when they don't realize you're behind them, and when they do, they're angry at you for being there, as if it was your fault they weren't paying attention to their surroundings. But Sadie sensed that these trees were somehow aware of their presence, their intrusion upon the sacred quietness. In answer to no one, she said, "I don't like this place. It's yucky and dark." "We're not turning around, Sadie. It's too far. Just hang in there until the end of the road." "My classmate Gordy says it's not far from the stump," said Jason. "Sadie's right. It's dark. If we don't find the spot we're looking for, maybe we'd turn around while it's still light enough," suggested Arnie. Don't be a baby, Arnie Barney," teased Jason. "Don't you believe me? When we find it, it's going to be the coolest thing anyone has ever found. Better than anything we ever saw in show and tell at school. Farmer Jacob's lockbox. Shoot, it's probably full of cash and gold. I'll bet we get really famous and really rich." Arnie had his doubts, but didn't share them. Jason sometimes had a bad temper when you disagreed with his most passionate beliefs. Instead, he just kept quiet and matched Jason's speed, leaving Sadie to bring up the rear. The forest grew darker as the time drew late. Not wishing to be in this foreboding place at night, they rode on as quickly as they could, wondering when they would get to the end. As the trees thinned out and revealed the sky overhead, it seemed like dusk, though the girls' watch showed only 2 p.m. At long last, the children came upon a clearing, smack in the center of which there was an old stone well, abandoned and gone dry, a rope ladder hanging over its rim, descending into its mysterious depth. "Yes!" exclaimed Jason. Though neither Arnie nor Sadie said so, they too felt the thrill of discovery, but also an uneasiness akin to dread. Parking their bikes on the ground, the three of them cautiously approached and then surrounded the lip of the well, a crude stone wall 2 feet high above the ground. Peering in, it might have been 40 or 80 feet down, the forest gloom making it hard to judge the depth, but they could detect no reflected light indicating water at the bottom. "So what do we do?" said Arnie. "One of us goes down the ladder to find the treasure. I brought a flashlight," said Jason, thumping his backpack, which he had taken off and set down. "Yeah, but how do we pick who goes down?" said Arnie. "I think the oldest one goes," said Sadie, looking up at her brother. "We should draw sticks. Whoever gets the shortest one climbs down," said Jason, adding, "But they get to claim they found it. And we'll split it even Steven, 'cause we're a team, right? This seemed fair to the boys, though Sadie thought it ought to be Jason, since it was his idea. When Arnie drew the shortest one, Sadie felt sorry for him, sorry that any of them had to go down the well, sorry that she even followed the boys here. Whatever misgivings Arnie might have about being picked, he hid it with his resolve to stand by his best friend through thick or thin. Jason had once beat the crap out of that weaselly kid, Ralph Kidders, who picked on Arnie in the first grade. Although Arnie could well stand on his own now, he felt a bond of blood between him and Jason. It was a code that mystified Sadie, who was pragmatic to the core. After lashing the flashlight to his arm with terry cloth wristbands that Jason had provided from his pack, Arnie looked grown up in Sadie's eyes, like the man who found King Tut's tomb. Then Arnie thumped his pack and gave Jason and Sadie a thumbs up and began his descent of the well as the rope ladder went taut from his weight. Seeing the light diminish with each rung Arnie stepped on, Sadie and Jason each offered up their own quiet prayer for his safety. Without thinking about it, they held each other's hand as they prayed. Minutes passed, seeming like hours, and Jason would yell down to make sure. "You good down there?" "Yeah, I'm still down here," replied Arnie, sounding echoey and a little distant. Finally he said, "I'm at the bottom." Sadie felt Jason's sweaty grip tighten on her hand. "What do you see down there?" shouted Jason. "Rocks, dirt, grass, bones, probably birds, mice, and..." "And what?" yelled Jason after Arnie's long pause. "There's some kind of tunnel down here, but it's blocked by a small boulder. Let me see if I can roll it aside. Okay, it's out of the way, and it seems to be large enough. I'm going in." "Careful," said Jason and Sadie at once, each wishing Arnie was with them rather than in a dark hole. After several minutes, which felt like 2 hours, they grew anxious at the silence down there, and at last Jason could not help himself. Peering down, he licked his lips and then said in a croak, "Arnie, are you okay? Talk to me." How Jason wished that he'd brought another flashlight along, but it was too late for that. He repeated, "Arnie, you okay? Say something." Sadie joined in and implored him to, "Arnie, please say something so we know you're safe." Nothing. Just faint noises of scrabbling around, rocks and pebbles being jostled. Then Arnie responded with his reply, which seemed faint to their ears, like he was very far away and exhausted to the core. "I'm okay. I couldn't hear either of you inside the tunnel. It was hot and stuffy and quiet, like being in a closet." It was hard for both siblings to contain their relief and excitement. "What did you see?" asked Sadie. "Not much. There was an old lockbox, but it was already unlocked and open. Nothing inside except a note. I couldn't read it with the flashlight. It's all faded and worn, but I saved it." Jason tried to stifle his disappointment at this news, but he was bursting with relief and not a little guilt at not volunteering to go down the ladder himself. He replied, "That's okay, Arnie. I'm just glad that you're back. Come on up and let's get out of these woods." It took a little longer for him to climb up the rope ladder, tired as he was from the activities of the day and for being down there. They had eaten all the snacks on the way to the clearing, and now he willed himself up by sheer determination. The growing circle of light above coalesced into a view of Jason and Sadie, both visibly shaken, yet eager for him to make it to them. At long last he did. Pushing through the final wall of exhaustion, he remained briefly at a balance point between gripping the well's lip and falling backward into oblivion. But the two grabbed hold of Arnie's outstretched arms and hauled him over to their side, back to the safety of each other's company. I will tell you now that if you thought the children were the only ones there, you're wrong. When the brother and sister were calling down to their friend, I thought it was me they were summoning. I did not answer, and they left me there. It's been repeated ever since that my ghost still haunts the woods, but that's not exactly right. Regarding the three friends, they grew up and eventually forgot this time in their past lives, except when they cared to recall it at various times that they reunited. Arnie and Sadie are both old and have grandchildren, and probably great-grandchildren now. Jason died in an accident while off on one of his adventures. It was reported that he'd foolishly decided not to use his oxygen tank as he attempted to reach the summit of some tall peak in the Himalayas. But at least he lived a fairly rich and long life, even so. I wouldn't say the same for myself. I am Jacob Oleander's robber. On one of his midnight travels through his forest, he did not see where I hid, right behind the tree nearest his well. All his proprietary greed over the land made me angry, and I decided to teach him a lesson by feigning I was a highwayman. Even at the point of death, he was stubborn and proud. And so, when he refused to give over the box, I caught him by surprise and pushed him over the lip into the deep shaft of darkness, where he fell to his death, his lockbox safely clutched in his claw-like hands, the back of his head ruined by the rock it hit. I was prepared and let drop below my pickaxe and shovel, then took care to let down my rope ladder and myself after it. It took me hours to dig a tunnel and a shallow hole into which Jacob's bones still remain. I took his silver and his notes, titles, stuffing them inside my waistcoat pockets. Then I wrote a confession of sorts, really it was an oath before God, and an incantation to keep Jacob still and secret. I tried to sell his treasures and exchange his coins for other things of more value. But it wasn't long before I befell the same fate. Convinced that he still had something on his person, I returned one night to the well, and as I peered in, I thought I saw a faint light. Perhaps another person had discovered his body and come to bring it to light, or worse yet, to steal away the last remaining treasure. Enraged at this thought, I strung over the ladder and climbed down, pistol tucked in my belt. But I was mistaken. There was no light down there, only what was cast from my lantern, which guttered and flickered now. I cursed myself and was about to climb up when I heard a sound that chilled me to my soul. Rocks were being loosened and moved aside. I gave a yell as my legs were swept up under me, and did not stop yelling while I was dragged by powerful claw-like hands. Inside the tunnel and into the hole I dug as Jacob Oleander's grave. There I was taken, and there I remain, in the physical shape I took in life, and deteriorated into at death. But the children, though they thought there was no one else there, they were wrong. I was there where they left me. At least it was my bones that they left there unknowingly. But my spirit has a new home, back in the world of the living. My words are my life, and my note lives on in Jason's keeping, both mind and soul. The end. I've always enjoyed writing, even though I also like to draw since I was a toddler. But the writing bug bit me early too. In 5th grade, my teacher, Mr. Marsh, encouraged creativity as a special skill every kid should have the opportunity to learn. So he had us do excerpts from Shakespeare's plays. I played Mark Antony in his famous speech from the play Julius Caesar. He also encouraged us to write stories, and I still have a copy of my story, The White Plague, loosely based on the Blob. Finally, this is a poem about my wonder at the changing seasons, as compared to flying in a hot air balloon. I wrote it on February 22nd, 2009, a column of air. Take off on a column of air. Fly with me now, if you dare. If you'll take a look to your right, you will see the glorious autumn of '73. Retreat now to winter and capture the cold. We'll take our provisions and store in our hold, then revel when spring comes all wrapped up in gold, bringing her sister in colors so bold, the mistress of summer we love to behold. Thank you. Did you like these stories? What about the poem? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Write them down below or go to my community tab to join a discussion thread I started about this. I'd love to discuss the craft of storytelling and writing with you. I'm not sure I actually wrote science fiction or horror. Probably it was both. The White Plague certainly wasn't great writing, but it was compelling enough to launch me into the storytelling sphere. Perhaps if I write enough stories, I'll know the best direction in which to take my writing. Maybe the stories I share on YouTube will make it into a collection that I'll publish and make available. Or they could just stay on this platform. However it shakes out, I hope you'll be around to see the growth of my fiction writing. and my poetry. Hi, it's me again, Roberto. Thanks for watching. If you like my content, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Also, click the notification bell so you don't miss any new updates of upcoming material. Thanks. Bye.